Rare Blind Faith photos. I bought this Life magazine from 1969. My grandma used to have a ton of Life magazines, like literally like every issue going back for years in her attic. So I always enjoyed Life magazine. But it's got Blind Faith in it. Let's look at some of the Blind Faith photos. I think these are probably some kind of rare photos of Blind Faith. Is it a bird, as in the Birds? Is it Jefferson Airplane? No, it's a supergroup. So we got some pictures of Blind Faith here. There they are. 1969. How cool is that, huh? There's an old rare picture of Ginger Baker. That's Rick Gretsch playing that great violin solo. He plays a great violin solo on Sea of Joy. There's Stevie Winwood. There's Eric Clapton. Looks like I don't think he's playing a Telecaster. You can just, going by the neck, I'm going to say that's a Gibson. Maybe that ES-335. Did he play that in Blind Faith? Yes, he did still sometimes. There's a picture. Let's get a good wide shot of that. On their first American tour, Blind Faith played huge halls like the 19,000 seat Los Angeles Forum. Everybody, they don't make rock and roll concerts like that anymore. Not only the quality of the music, but just the whole cultural vibe of rock and roll music in its heyday. Let's have a few pictures here. And I actually remember seeing this at my grandma's house. There's Eric Clapton buying a car. In a Los Angeles showroom, Eric Clapton considers buying a four-seater Excalibur. He has a Mercedes and a Mini Moke, but this is something special, a copy of a 1927 Mercedes with the Corvette engine. I remember reading in his biography, he talks about Bing and Cream, and it was the first time in his whole life he'd ever had a lot of money, and how he loved to buy cars, and kind of went crazy at first. And there's Ginger Baker. The sight of Ginger Baker, his long hair tied back, beating furiously on his drums, leaves the crowd bedazzled. There's Stevie Winwood. Nice Martin. No Taylors back then. So if you saw a nice guitar, it was almost always a Martin and sometimes a Gibson, but I would say almost always a Martin. Led Zeppelin played Martins. Jimmy Page played Martins. There's Ginger Baker. What a colorful character Ginger Baker was, huh? Let's see, I think we've got... All right, there's an ad. Now, this was kind of interesting. This is the anatomy of a supergroup, the genealogy of a supergroup. Rock groups form, divide, multiply, and the fittest musicians survive. On their separate ways to the top, the members of Blind Faith performed with a variety of English groups, most of them now defunct. This genealogy shows the ascending order of these groups in the past taken by some of their earlier colleagues. The fittest seem to start young. Clapton, now 24, was 16 when he joined his first group. Baker, 30, was 15. Gretsch, 23, was 18. Winwood, 21, was 15. Stevie Winwood was 21. But you've got here this chart. It almost looks like a kind of a cartoon. But there's Eric Clapton. Let's look at his genealogy. The Roosters... Paul Jones, was Brian Jones in the Roosters with Eric Clapton and Charlie Watts? I guess that would be kind of confusing. Casey Jones. On that History of Eric Clapton album, there's a Roosters song, but Casey Jones, I'm not sure about. They're the Yardbirds. Then it shows the Jimmy Page splitting off to the Yardbirds, Jeff Beck splitting off to the Jeff Beck group. It says defunct John Mayall's Blues Breakers. And John Mayall. And Manfred Mann. Jack Bruce was in Manfred Mann. Blinded by the light. Man, there's so many groups, and their names will be familiar, but you got to really stop and think who they were, who was in them. And there's Blind Faith at the pinnacle. I guess that's a supergroup. Ginger Baker, various jazz groups, the Johnny Birch Quartet, Alexis Corner's Blues Incorporated, the Grand Bond band. Yeah, and Songs for a Tailored Grand Bond Band, which also had Jack Bruce in it there. Hextall Smith. See, there's so many names. Boy, all that's English history, too. English musical history. Let's look at... now, Rick Gretsch, you don't hear too much about him, but he was a great bass player. And Clapton said a really good guy. He died of, I think, alcohol issues. He drank all the time, and he tanked his liver. So, but he was in a group called Family for years. And then just went into Blind Faith. Then you've got Stevie Winwood here, Island Records, and the Spencer Davis Group. You got to give me some lovin'. I'm in a oldies band that I've been playing with the last few months, and that's one of our best songs. You got to give me some lovin'. Just great. The Animals, okay. I have to go through this chart. It's kind of interesting. Then Traffic. And it says Dave Mason, Chris Wood, Jim Capaldi disbanded. Then it reformed. Okay, so Traffic had broken up like Cream had broken up. So Clapton and Stevie Winwood, who were kind of the two main people, really, if you think about it, in Blind Faith, they had both broken up. Clapton had left Cream over here. And Stevie Winwood had just left Traffic, and there's Blind Faith. Pretty interesting, huh? And I think that's it. Old Granddad. And I guess we got another Marlboro ad. Cowboy Killers. Should I admit I've smoked Marlboros before? Maybe I won't admit it. First one in the morning always tasted pretty good, maybe after a meal, but boy, they were strong, and you didn't feel good after you smoked a lot of those things. You're so much better off without that crap, but nonetheless, it did have its pleasures every once in a while. Life Magazine, October 1969, with Blind Faith. A lot of it, I was going to show you more, but it's not quite as colorful as the Playboy magazine and the Cream magazine we just looked at. Still pretty interesting. A lot of liquor ads, a lot of cigarette ads. There's a stereo. JVC. I found myself interested that there were so many stereo and audio gear ads. Volvo. Firestone tires. Yeah. Champagne. You know what, everybody? I almost said class. 1969 wasn't perfect, but at least I'd like to go back to 1969. Here's we have some stuff on protesting. Just look at that really quickly. Vietnam War. I wasn't old enough to serve, but I definitely remember the protests and people being pissed off about it. And just remember this, class, in Ukraine, all those men are drafted into the war in Ukraine. They're drafted. Women aren't drafted. Men are drafted. And it's a pretty big crime to try to leave the country in Ukraine. And so you want to get drafted and get killed? Just remember, you wouldn't want it to happen to you. Anyway, there's Marlboro cigarettes. Blind Faith. We'll end with the picture of the Blind Faith. Where's that Blind Faith? Anyway, wherever it was. Thanks. God bless.